And so success is a 3-part series. And what's interesting is a lot of times we can learn about something by knowing what it's not. And every time I ask people what's the opposite of success, they tell me that the opposite of success is failure. And I would disagree 100% wholeheartedly, because I've never met anyone who hasn't failed their way to success. Failure is a stepping stone to success. Failure is the process.
All right, Jeff Griffin, thanks for joining me, my man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate you allowing me to sit on your shoulders for a few minutes here and shine some light on what you are doing.
Yeah, dude, I love that, man. And I mean, I know I've done my research on you a little bit, as much as I can, right? Griffin Motivation. You've got a lot of other. You worked at seminaries and institutes. You're kind of all over the place, huh?
You know what? I've been all over the place.
Been all over the place.
Absolutely. Being all over the place is different than been all over the place. I just want to make that sure, because people are like listening. Wait, I'm out. If this guy's all over the place, I'm out.
Ooh, okay. You, but let's kind of go to the big question that I always like to talk about, and that's leadership, especially in like 2023, when you're talking about like companies who might be struggling with churn, they might be struggling with onboarding people. But I think leadership in a bigger sense of like, how can people cultivate those leadership capabilities and like abilities in their everyday life? What are some things that you've done or that you go over to help people be leaders every day?
No, that's a great question, because I love that. Because if you go to my website, there's a tagline that says helping leaders lead.
Yeah.
Because, I don't want to go in and take over. I don't want to go in and change things or, create this great big huge shift of moving somewhere where they don't want to go. What I want to do is I want to go in there and support what the leaders are doing. A lot of times a leader will be saying the same message over and over and over again. And if you've ever heard the same song over and over and over again, sometimes you zone out. And that's what's happening here with these companies and with these employees, with these leaders. It's not that the leaders, aren't getting the message through. It's just the employees have stopped listening to the same music, the same notes, the same message, whatever it is. And I get to go in there and I just get to validate what those leaders are trying to do. And so a lot of times my messaging and my message is for the whole. Other times it's to specifically help the leader themselves. But, what we want to do there is we want to go in there and just really support the leader. For example, there's one not senior VP, but a VP of sales of a bank in California. It's a small little bank. And when I say small, right, they had 60 relationship managers there in Newport Beach, California, from all their branches, from New York to Florida to Oregon, California. Again, it wasn't a nationwide bank, but they brought in 60 of the relationship managers. Their desire was to bring in $400 million new dollars that they've never done before. And so, they're having their training and whatnot. And I came in and I got to share my message, my message of you are the solution to impossible. I introduced the 3Ds to this group. And after I was finished, she came up to me. She's like, Jeff, thank you so much for eliminating our excuses. There is no reason why we can't hit our targets. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. That's beautiful. And so a year later, I'm like, well, I want to follow up and see how things went. And so I called her up and talked to her assistant, and Ian's like, Jeff, I don't know what Shiva told you our number was, but I just want to let you know that we ended up with $530 million.
Whoa.
So $130 million more than they thought they desired. And all these people are like, we can't even hit 400 million, but they exceeded it by 130. If I would have known that, I would have taken a percentage.
Yeah, no
a
kidding.
small percentage instead of a flat fee for that speech. But that's just kind of an example of what we get to do is, go in there and just really shine a light on what these leaders are trying to accomplish and eliminate those constraints that they have.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that it's very, very similar in each company, in each place that I go to, because people are people.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. People are people. And one of the biggest constraints that we have as people is this ability to believe in the incredible, to achieve and receive that which the masses says is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah,
I always say that, if for every minute you doubt it's possible, you give up 60 seconds to finding the solution.
That's fair, man. I love it. Can I ask you about this? Because this is something as a sales trainer that I run into quite a bit. And it's the idea of confidence. Can you break down what confidence is? Because I feel like that's a little bit that touches on kind of what you're talking about, right? Like eliminating excuses, eliminating doubt, and maybe it's not, but in my experience, confidence is number one. Like that's the first thing that I have to do as like a sales trainer, or if I'm like talking with a group of salespeople, is figure out like how confident are they, and are they really? You know what I mean? But can you shed some light on that? Break it down.
Absolutely. It sounds to me like you've dealt with some people. I call it fool's gold confidence.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
If you've ever experienced that before, as a football player, in college, you go up against some pretty amazing athletes. But in high school, what was interesting is, in high school there, I played against a lot of people who were little yappers. I call them chihuahuas. And they're just yippy and yappy, and they were talking a big game. But what was interesting is you go out there and focus on what you can do instead of what they're trying to get you to focus on. And I called that fool's gold confidence. And so that's what I'm hearing you say is some of these people are like, yes, I can do this, but they're not getting the results. And so that's like the fool's gold confidence where you're like, I'm braggadocio. I have all the confidence in the world, when in reality, they really don't. And so what we need to do is we just need really to break it down. We need to break it down. And what's interesting is great questions lead to great discovery. Mm-hmm. And so by asking a few questions, you're able to discover exactly what it is that they are deficient in. And so, some people might just be deficient in the correct order. Approach somebody, you've got to build some relationships of trust before you just go in there and ask for the sell or whatnot. And so, they may have the elements, they may have the things, but they're just in the wrong order. And so so again, each person is different, each situation is different, but by simply asking the questions and making that assessment, you're able to then give them some information. Mm-hmm. Then you can recommend what it is. And so I'm like, that's kind of like trying to clear the air. It's an acronym, AIR. And you're like, okay, I want to assess what's going on here, the A, and then I want to inform them. Once I've discovered what it is that I'm looking for, I inform them, the I, and then the R is the recommend. Here's the recommendation. Here's the recipe. Mm-hmm. Here's the prescription. Here's what it is that's going to take you to the next level. And so each person is different, each place is different. And so that's why it's so important to go in there and assess the situation and find out what's going on there. But you're absolutely right. Confidence is huge. Believing that you have the ability, believing that, not just, kind of hoping, but believing that you have the ability to accomplish dreams and desires. And I love to use the story from The Great Blondine to illustrate this idea of belief. I don't know if you ever heard of The Great Blondine. Have you heard of The Great Blondine?
Maybe. Tell me.
So The Great Blondine is the world's best tightrope walker.
Oh, okay.
And he sets up his tightrope all over the place, him and his manager. And one time they found themselves at Niagara Falls. And so they set up the ropes across the falls, and the big crowd shows up, and the Great Blondine is standing up there falls behind his back, and he asks the crowd, "How many of you guys believe that I can walk across this tightrope blindfolded?" Whoa. Hands go up.
Whoa.
And he's like, "Okay, well, how many of you guys can believe that I can walk across this tightrope blindfolded with the wheelbarrow?" Hands go up. And so he's like, "How many guys believe that I can walk across this tightrope blindfolded with the wheelbarrow with somebody in it?" Hands go up. Can I get a volunteer?
Oh yeah, nobody. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
hands go down. And so his manager jumps in the wheelbarrow and he gets blindfolded and they go across the falls. But this idea of belief, do you really believe? Do you really believe you have the tools and skills? Do you believe you have the ability? Do you really believe that you have the correct process in place? Because that process is huge, and you know that as a trainer. And so that's crucial. And so confidence. Here's what's cool. A lot of people think that you're born with confidence, and there are some of those who are gifted and they come with that. They come with it, and everything they touch turns to gold. And you ask them how they do that, like, I don't know.
Right.
And but others who have to work for it, you can definitely teach somebody how to increase their confidence. And I associate confidence with desire. Desire and confidence are almost synonymous. And so you've got to be able to know how to increase your desire. You got to know what a desire is. You got to know how to increase it. And then there's ways to do that.
Yeah. How are desire? That's an interesting one. I haven't really connected the dots on. Tell me more about desire and confidence, because as I'm exploring it in my head, it makes sense, right? But I'm thinking, like, I know a lot of people who want it bad and they just can't figure it out. And maybe wanting it bad isn't the same thing as desire.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's a great question because, so desire, right? So what I did in sharing with this group of 60 relationship managers, I introduced the 3Ds, which is the foundation of all our challenges, the foundation of all our problems. And my problem is different than your problem, and your listeners' problems are different than everyone else's. And I don't want to diminish or make anyone feel like that I'm thinking less of your problems, right? But we all have them. So the problem isn't the problem, Dalton. We all have problems. It's the lack of how we look at those problems and approach those problems, and how we flip the switch and reframe those problems and turn them into solutions. We as a society, we focus so much time on the problem and identifying the problem, and not enough time on the solution. And so what we want to do here is bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And the way to bridge that gap, I believe, are 3Ds. There's desire, dream, and do. Those are the 3Ds that are the foundation of every solution, because every problem under the sun has a solution or has none. If there be one, hurry and find it. If there be none, never mind it. And so, let's figure out the solution. Let's stop talking about the problem, and start focusing on the solution. And so what we do is we dissect what a desire is and really identify what is a desire and how do we increase that. And so simply put, a desire is a strong, a hankering after, a feeling of something that we think about. And so if you break it down to that, into the simplistic, or the simplicity, what you have here is a desire is simply a thought.
Yeah.
And so, everything that we have, this computer, these microphones, this, everything we have comes from a thought. This formless thing, this idea that comes here. And so we're like, okay, well, if a desire is a thought, then how do we increase our desires? Well, we increase our thoughts, and it's where we put our thoughts, and it's where we put our focus. It's where we think. And the sad truth is, if George Bernard Shaw is accurate, he says that 2% of the population think, 3% of the population think they think, and 95% of the population would rather die than think.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've seen organizations, communities, countries, families, and individuals would rather die than think. And so, are you in the 3% where you think, or are you in the 2% where you think? And so again, going back to, let's give you the process, let's give you the pattern, let's give you the path that leads to that success, the results that we want. And, so number one is, am I thinking? Am I doing the thinking, or is somebody else doing the thinking for me? Do I truly believe that I have the ability to get these sales, or does my boss trying to convince me that I have the ability.
Yeah.
And so again, it's going back to, okay, well, a desire is simply a thought. And then you've got the dreams, which are crystallized desires. And so, we could have a whole conversation on what comes first, the desire, the dream, or the desire, and all these other things. But what's interesting is most of us want the results. Just give me the results.
Yeah.
And so we give them the tools and the skills to get the results, but they don't change their thinking. They don't change their mindset.
Yeah.
And so that is crucial in anything that we deal with, because everything we do is 100% mental.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I'm talking to sales teams, I do spend quite a bit of time on like the mindset piece of it and their attitude, because I really believe one of the things that I have like kind of a hot take on in selling is like, it doesn't really matter what you say to a customer. Like it doesn't really matter what your script is or anything like that, because I've seen some crazy, I mean, we've all seen it, right? Like how do these guys who are like hard closers is what I would call them, right? Like these hard closers, how are they so successful? Or like these people who never use a closing line in the world, how are they successful? And a lot of it just comes down to like, they're comfortable in their own skin. They're comfortable with what they're saying. And if they believe it, someone else will believe it. And that's all you need, right? Kind of at the beginning is like just someone else to believe in you. And it's tough. Like when, if you can't go through the action yourself of like believing in yourself, it's very difficult then to get other people's buy-in.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Everyone has a BS meter.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone has a BS meter. And if you know that it doesn't work, and if you know that they're not going to get the results, but you just want the sell, everyone has that BS meter. And so, you got those hard closers, as you mentioned. And what's interesting is I've always wanted to see a study or see some real results, the real numbers that are manipulated to match what you want your outcome to be. But I'd be interested to see how many of those hard closers have refunds.
Oh yeah, no, I know a lot of them do. I know a few in the industry, and
if you know what I'm talking about, where it's like you keep pushing until finally like, I'll take it. As soon as you leave, I'm going to hit refund.
Yeah, refund or like so I always say like it's not necessarily about the close rate for a salesperson, but it's also about like the customer success ratings, like how happy are your customers, what's your churn rate, because your money did no good if it's 1 month. But no, they're pretty high, right? Like those guys, it never works out in the long run, but it's just that initial like, man, they don't have anything different than me, right? Walk me through that. I've always thought about that, Jeff, and I'm curious on your thoughts about the people who kind of take their, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's always just to me, it's always kind of a little bit unempathetic, but I'm wondering if I can do it, anybody can do it. And they're like, I don't know, man.
No, absolutely. I know where you're coming from, because I look at myself as a under ordinary guy who does the ordinary just a little extra.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where the extraordinary comes from. Playing on the Paralympic team and dealing with some of these world-class athletes, the difference between gold and silver is sometimes just 1/1000th of a second, or the smallest, the razor's edge, or whatever you want to describe it as. And so, again, how do you go? How do you get gold instead of silver? How do you get gold instead of bronze? How do you get a medal instead of just showing up? And how do you become extraordinary?
Yeah.
And the way you become extraordinary is by doing the ordinary just a little extra. And so you've got to trust in the process. You've got to trust in the process. And I call that developing a P-squared mindset. Going back to confidence, you can develop confidence by developing a desire, a true desire, a desperate desire. a deliberate desire, a real desire. And so again, going back to, okay, well, what is that desire? How can we dissect what that desire is? And so that P squared mindset is the footings of the foundation. As you recall, I talked about the 3Ds. It's the foundation of every problem that we have, and it's where you can find the solution as well. And so you got the 3Ds of the foundation, but then you've got the possibility principle, which is the footings, or the P squared mindset. The P squared mindset that those 3Ds are going to be sitting on, and that possibility principle that there's at least five benefits that come from developing this P squared mindset, and one of them is you've got to trust in the process instead of the promise. But so often we just focus on the promise, we focus on the benefits, we focus on the results, we focus on the end, and we abort the process. But it's the process that helps us progress. And so we've got to have complete confidence in that process. And so what we need to do is we need to find a process that really works.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes back to salespersons. They're like, okay, well, do I really believe in this process? You say it works, but do I really believe in that process? And so right before they get the close, they're like, I just don't trust this. And they deviate.
Yes. Yep.
And so you're like, okay, well, was it the process? Was it your personality? Or was it just your lack of confidence or your lack of belief? Going back to this P squared mindset, being able to have that mindset to push through the pushback that's going to happen, to be able to, deal with the opposition to your optimism. And whenever we do something new, we're always going to feel uncomfortable. Right. So another aspect of the P squared mindset is being comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. Being comfortable being stretched, being comfortable with the struggle, being comfortable with the silence, being comfortable with, the objections. Mm-hmm. And then being comfortable in knowing that the results are coming. Yeah. The results are coming.
Yeah, there's a lot of experience. I remember when I was, a young salesperson, and just, a customer would freak out, or they would backtrack a little bit, right? And you just like freak out because you're like, I don't know what to do. But as you get a little more seasoned in that, you realize this is part of the game, right? And we just got to play it and go through, and it'll be fine. It'll work out. It's so hard to see that if you've never experienced it, right? Do you practice maybe experiencing it, or is there a way to like go through that? Or do you just like, or at the beginning when you're teaching somebody these principles, you just like, bro, so the first few reps, you're just going to have to white knuckle it, man. You're just going to have to trust me. You know what I mean? And just hold on, man. Right.
Absolutely. And what's interesting too, you might have worked with some of these people. I call it finding the simplicity on the far side of complexity.
Oh yeah. Okay.
To illustrate that, it's football season. And when you hear coaches or offensive coordinators say that the game has slowed down. Mm-hmm. The game has slowed down, meaning they have found the simplicity on the far side of complexity, because football can be very, very complex. It can be very, very quick. It can be a different speed and all that stuff. You get to the NFL level, and then it's a completely different level. Yeah. And so what's happened here is these athletes have climbed that mountain and have discovered the simplicity on the far side of complexity, but they've got to go through the process. They've got to do the steps. They got to put in the work. They've got to, practice in order to discover that. They've got to train. And you ask the question, well, what do you do? And this is one of the least favorite things for people, but it's one of the most effective, and that is role playing.
Yeah. That's it. Huh?
Role playing.
Oh, so many people hate it.
Oh yeah. They're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'll just figure it out when it happens. I'm like, good luck, bro. Because what happens here is when we increase the pressure, what happens to performance? Does the performance increase, or does performance decrease?
Decrease.
It decreases. We go back to what's comfortable. We go back to what's familiar. We go back to what is natural. And the only way to become natural at being uncomfortable, or dealing with rejection, or dealing with
Yes.
Those triggers and those pushback is to put yourself in that situation and prepare. It's just, it's prepare. It's like practice. I'm like, you've got to do it. If you have to do it mentally, that's great. That's fine. You're doing it mentally, but there's nothing like doing it
with somebody, like in real
somebody. Yeah, the role playing. The role playing is essential.
Yeah. And what do you role play the process? You just go through and whatever happens. Because I always, I prefer when we role play to role play, not worst case scenario, but like this is pretty common, right? Because I live in this counterintuitive approach where it's like, if you're, if you're ready to jump and nothing happens, right? Like then you're cool. But if you jump, then you're ready for it, right? Like if it happens, sweet. If it doesn't, sweet. And so I always like role play. I don't ever throw in like unreasonable things, but I role play pretty tough scenarios because if they say yes, then you're good, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's dealing with the objections.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's dealing with the objections. And so you're like, okay, well, first of all, what was interesting with sales is, did we truly address the pain?
Mm-hmm.
Did we truly address the situation that they're currently in? And then did we allow them to feel it? Did we allow them to experience it, or did we jump over that because we want to get to the sell? I don't know if you've ever seen Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
With,
been a minute, but I'm familiar. Yeah.
What's his name? Anyway, he's on Caddyshack and he's on all these other movies as well. But the character, he gets stuck in the same day, and he finds this woman, and he's like, "Oh, wait a minute!" And he gets closer and closer to his desire, which is making out with this lady or kissing her or whatever. And he gets so close, and so the very next day, he's like trying to rush through everything to get to the end.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what happens as sales people, especially, is we want to get to the end, and we forget about the leading up to it and the other things that are happening as well.
Yeah. Or what's crazy about that is like another thing that I hate. I'm a sales trainer, so I have to do it every once in a while, but I hate dealing with I hate the whole objections masterclass. Like, let's talk about how to handle all 5 of these objections. It's like, dude, not today, because most everybody knows, right? Like, we're not in an information age. Like, we're past the information age. Like you were saying, right? We're past what's the problem?
Right.
Now it's like, why change and why now? Because most of the objections are like, you haven't, like you mentioned, right? You haven't convinced them of why change and why now.
Right.
They know, right? They know. Like, I know why I suck. But like, why should I? You know what I mean? You ever run into that too? You're like, Jeff, I get it. Cut to the chase, man. What's going on?
I get it. What do we got going here? I'm like, okay, well, let's do this. But Bill Murray is the guy, by the way. Bill Murray, I know it.
Okay. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, Bill Murray, Groundhog's Day, and so again, it's it's something that I've, as you mentioned, I've been an instructor for 17 years. I was a banker for 3 years prior to that. Been all over the place, or done all these other things. Biz dev guy here recently, but one thing I've discovered working with some of the harshest critics called teenagers.
Dude, they're ruthless, aren't they?
They are ruthless, but now that I'm working with executives, I realize that executives are harsher than teenagers because adults are just teenagers who haven't figured it out. We've grown up physically, but we haven't grown up mentally or intellectually or whatnot. And so we just haven't dealt with all those, we haven't dealt with some of our skeletons that, that are keeping us from experiencing the type of success we truly desire. But one thing I've learned is that, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And so again, going back to, as we mentioned earlier, is with the products and other things as well. Like, do we truly believe in this product that it's going to change and benefit this person? Do we truly believe that it is going to bring them to a different level? That's going to increase their capacity to receive? Is it going to help them with their relationships? Is it going to help them increase their money? Is it going to help them hold on to their money? What's interesting with these athletes, the majority of these athletes, multi-million-dollar athletes, because they have not been trained or taught to expand their thinking, they have all this money, and then as soon as they leave the game, they lose the money.
Yeah,
look at Mike Tyson. All this money that Mike Tyson had. He's like, okay, well, where is that? Well, because he didn't work on his mindset.
Yeah,
he didn't work on that aspect of it. And so you can't increase your wallet until you increase your mind. You can't increase your influence until you increase your mind. You can't increase, your leadership skills until you increase your mind.
Right.
We have to expand our vision. The problem isn't the problem; it's the lack of vision.
Right. And what's funny is like the problem is it never, I don't know. In my experience, like, problems are like that, one door closes, another one opens kind of thing. Like they never really go away. They just manifest themselves differently. But the beautiful thing about like what you're talking about is like the same way you handle one is very similar to how you handle another. Like we've seen this problem before. Like I think that's where a big piece of confidence comes in. At least that's what it is for me. Like, when I'm in a sales conversation, like, cause I also like, I'm a sales trainer, but I'm actively on a sales team and managing a team. And it's like, dude, we've seen this before. We've seen this problem before. And they're like, no way, this is way different. And I'm like, no, break it down. Like, this is not new. Like we know how to handle it. Like this is and I get people who are like, "Wow, that's crazy," and you're like, no.
The game has slowed down for Dalton. The game has slowed down. Dalton has found the simplicity on the far side of complexity. He's like, "Hey, listen, keep throwing them at me. We've got this. And if I don't understand this, I understand how to problem solve.
Yeah, that's it.
Understand how to solve the problem, and the younger generation in our education system has taught people how to memorize things instead of solve for the problems. It's like, okay, well, how do I do this? Where's the instruction manual for this?
Right.
You know what? There's some simple little steps that you can take to figure this out, to figure out the solutions.
Yeah. I remember actually, my favorite class, and this is when, cause my mom actually taught me this. And I think it was because she just needed me to get a good grade on it. So she didn't have to like hold me back that year or whatever. But I remember we were doing like a physics class or something. And everybody, do you remember those? And I think people this just got too much heat because I never hear about it anymore. But it's like we learned about all these things in the book. And then the test was nothing like the book. Right. And my physics teacher, Mr. Sellers, he would do that to us. And it was consistently frustrating. It was like, dude, he was like, no, you remember these 4 problems we went through? Like, this is it. And we're like, dude, that's not even close. But it taught us like problem solving. And that's also why I'm not a college basher. Number one, I win. Number 2 is like, it's not what you learn, it's how you learn it. Mm-hmm. Because like I've been, and I think that just preps you. So I think that's a great point that you bring up is like, it's not so much about the problem that you're trying to solve as much as like, how do you solve problems in general? Because like, I don't use applied physics anymore in my life, but I do know how to solve really complex problems now. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is the problem you're solving is with another human being.
Yeah. Which way to throw in a whole nother wrench into that.
Yeah. Somebody who thinks different, who acts different, who reacts who feels different, all these things. And so you're like, okay, what's going to happen? How do we deal with this? And if the right customer doesn't come around or come along, you're like, oh, okay, skip. Oh, finally, this one fits my abilities instead of me being able to adapt to their.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk about your story a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I know we got a little bit of time left. But doing the research right, you always had the goal of, being on the big stage, I think is how they wrote it right. And then it was a construction accident. How did you deal with that? Like, because it could seem at that moment, I'm sure that like maybe it was all gone.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, what's interesting is my whole life, going back to the 3Ds, desire, dream, and do. And so we talked about desire, and the other one is dream. The other one, and this is probably one of the most essential aspects of, a good sales team, a good leader, a good company, everything. I've learned that most of us don't know what we want, but most of us don't know what we want, but the majority of us know what we don't want, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so if we keep focusing on what we don't want, we're going to continue to get that. And so success is a 3-part series. And what's interesting is a lot of times we can learn about something by knowing what it's not. And every time I ask people what's the opposite of success, they tell me that the opposite of success is failure. And I would disagree 100% wholeheartedly, because I've never met anyone who hasn't failed their way to success. Failure is a stepping stone to success. Failure is the process to success. However, you got to get to a point where you don't want people to fail. I don't want my surgeon to fail. I don't want my airline pilot to fail. I don't want, all these other things to fail. But if we're learning something new and we're trying to, get it to the point where it is like humming and running, that, we've got to figure out those steps. But, so one of the first step to success, it's KFC. It's not the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the finger licking good stuff, but it's the acronym of, you got to know what you want, you've got to finish what you start, and you got to celebrate the process.
Yeah.
So most people don't know what they want. And so that's the first step to success, is like, okay, well, you got to figure out what you want. And so part of that is dreaming. And I call it dream weaving. And, in 10 minutes, we can figure out what you want by dream weaving. And a lot of times, though, the first time we do that, it takes about an hour to 2 hours, because we want to unpack it. We want to get rid of, we want to unpack it, and we want to go into your subconscious. And there's some tools and techniques that we use to do that. But once we're done, we have a list a mile long of what it is that you want to do. And now we just get to choose and prioritize what it is that we want to do first. And for me as a little kid, my dream was to play on the big stage, as you mentioned. And so everything I did to get bigger, faster, and stronger. I grew up in Cache Valley in Aggie country, but I wanted to go play in Cougar country down at BYU. But the problem was they breed them to hate them up there in Cache Valley, but that's okay, because I was a receiver. They just churned out All-American quarterbacks, and I was a receiver, and I wanted to play for the next American, All-American quarterback. Long story short, as you said, in between seasons, I did get to taste the sweetness of success, and I got to experience what that would be like. And it was wonderful. It was beautiful. And what was interesting is, fortunately for me, I didn't listen to the naysayers. I didn't listen to those boo birds. I didn't listen to the people who base our possibilities on their limitations. Mm-hmm. And continue to chase down my dream. And I was able to accomplish it. And I played 2 downs in college. I got to experience what it'd be like to be on the first team. My identity of being this athlete, being able to play on the big stage, was coming to fruition. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming back next year, and I get to experience that. Well, in between seasons, I was working for myself, started my own business as a painter, was up 40 feet on some scaffolding. The scaffolding ladder slipped out from underneath me. I came straight down, stuck the landing perfect, broke my back, which left me paralyzed from the waist down. Was given a life sentence to never walk, never stand, never move my legs again. So as a football player that had his whole identity wrapped up in his physicality, that was a shock to the system. And I entered into that sauna of self-pity. I went into that tailspin. I went into those dark recesses of your mind, and started, shaking my fist at God, complaining to anyone who would listen to me, and just started focusing on all the things that I couldn't do. Mm-hmm. And that was a dark, bleak time in my life. So the question is what do you do? What do you do when your dreams have been taken out from underneath you? What do you do when your dreams have come crumbling down? What do you do when other people have, destroyed them? What do you do when you destroy them yourself? You self-sabotage. What do you do when you're dealt with a major challenge or a difficult setback? What's your MO? What's your go-to? What do you do? Because I'm telling you right now, life is going to punch you in the face. Things are not going to go the way you want to. Sales aren't going to go the way you want to. Your team isn't going to go the way you tell them to go. So how do you deal with these major challenges that you're dealt with? And a lot of times these challenges are human beings. You're like, how do I deal with these human beings? How do I deal with these, these teenagers who are in adult bodies? And so, for me, it was like, okay, how do I deal with this challenge in my life where my identity has been stripped away from me, has been taken away from me, where the experts gave me a license to never walk, never stand, never move my legs again. And so, there was an event that took place in the hospital that changed my life forever, that helped me flip the switch, reframe how I think, and help me remember the steps I took to get to the big stage in the first place. And so, there's a question that helped me exit that sauna of self-pity to where I was able to sift through my broken back and shattered dreams and discover some flecks of gold that have helped me and these critics called teenagers, to dream new dreams, to orchestrate, conduct a song that sings inside their soul, to be able to climb their Everest, to be able to accomplish their dreams and desires in order, to help them accomplish their goals and take those steps into the darkness long before they ever see the end, to take those steps to climb that mountain, to find the simplicity on the far side of complexity. And so I discovered some flecks of gold that helped me put together this program that has helped thousands of others pick up the pieces, create and orchestrate their own dreams, and accomplish them. As I mentioned, there's a group of bankers that were able to get, hit their $400 million mark, but exceeded by 130. Worked with some plumbers, worked with some welders. We've worked with police officers who wanted to be Navy SEAL. And serve our country. So, we've also even worked with some elementary kids, and it works. It works for these younger kids as well as these older kids, and they're able to just, take an advantage. Be able to get ahead of everyone else. And so, so there was a question that was asked to me in the hospital by a prisoner that set me free from my prison. And there's the irony of the whole thing, because we as a society think that these prisoners have nothing to give. They're just a menace to society. They're like, we don't want anything to do with them. This guy was working out, had an aneurysm in his brain, paralyzed the right side of his body. He was doing therapy in the hospital. And there was one day that I was having a pity party, and he asked the question that set me free from my prison. And I've never been back, Dalton. I've never been back to that sauna. I've had some low days. I've had some slow days. But I've never had those dark days that I did when I broke my back and my dreams of playing football was taken from me, was stripped from me.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's crazy. Go ahead.
And your listeners are probably wondering, what's the question? What's the question that the prisoner asked you? And the question that he asked me was, in his slurred speech, he asked me, "Why are you crying, dude?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Why are you crying, dude?" And I recognized the question that he was asking me, which was, "Why are you crying, dude?" And that simple question just snapped me out of my pity party. I'm like, holy crap, why am I crying? Why am I crying? And I noticed that there's a guy down the table that had, paralyzed from the neck down, had screws, a halo screwed to his skull. And he's like, okay, can't even feed himself, can't even move. And I'm like, why am I crying? I can hug, I can transfer, I can do all these things. And then that simple question allowed me to flip the switch to start focusing on the things that I can do instead of the things that I can't do. And one of the things that every single one of us can do is we can change the scenario in our minds. We can play it out in our minds to where we can see the end, even though we're not even close to the end. We're not even close to that person. We're not even close to that sale that we want. We're not even close to that relationship that we want to establish. We're not even close to the wealth that we truly want. We're not even close, to, the kindness and the forgiveness that we need to find in our hearts. But, we have that desire and we see it. We have that dream. And so what we can do is we can all dream new dreams. We can all conduct and orchestrate that song of things inside our soul. We can all work on our desire, which helps our dreams become crystal clear, which then helps us do the things that we need to do, because man cannot dream himself into character. He must hammer and forge one for himself. And so we've got to do in order to receive.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And I really like the question that, you shared, because it is really hard to, one of my favorite things about questions as in their nature is they force you to justify your position. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty difficult, right? Why I think a lot of us don't ask the hard questions to ourselves. Why at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned a lot of us can't sit in silence, right? Or like with our own thoughts, because then we have to justify everything. And that's and then we have to take accountability, right? Like you have to you have to look in the mirror and give yourself a big piece of that pie, even though you don't want to. Wow. That's incredible. Well, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. I know we're short time, but where can everybody follow you, get involved with your training and your coaching? If they want to do that, let us know.
Absolutely. The fastest and easiest way is to go to my website at griffinmotivation.com, GRIFFIN, like the mythical beast, half eagle, half lion. I've been married 26 years, and I try to convince my wife that I'm still a mythical beast. And she's like, you're neither a beast nor mythical. And so you can tell we've been around each other for quite some time.
Heck yeah.
But at griffinmotivation.com, you can go to my Instagram, my Facebook, LinkedIn handles, YouTube channel, whatnot. If you just want to go straight to the Instagram, it's at Jeff Griffin 10. But, reach out to me. We have some books, some tools that really help, that kind of give the genesis of the story. This one right here was the first one. It's called I'm Possible, Desire, Dream, Do. We're in our third print. And,
very cool.
It's a living example of putting into practice these principles. In sixth grade, I got a D- in English, and my high school teacher told me I'd never write a comprehensive sentence. And all that was validated my freshman year in college when I showed up on day one and we wrote a paragraph. On day two, they called 6 of us out of 300 to the back of the auditorium. We're like, I was one of them. I'm like, what'd I win? And they're like, you want a date with the remedial English teacher? I'm like, what does that mean? Like, that's exactly why you need it. But this book right here, I'm Possible, Desire, Dream, Do, is kind of like the genesis. It kind of introduces the 3 Ds. And then this one right here, Endless Possibilities, the 90-day recipe for world record results, is the tool that helps you change your programming, that helps you overcome the opposition, that helps you feel comfortable being uncomfortable, that helps you trust in the process, that helps you discover what hope is. And that's the beauty of it. If you ever read a good book, it's called, besides these two, it's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And she says that gritty people are hopeful people. And I love her book, but I think she has this upside down, because I think that hopeful people are gritty people.
Yeah.
And for me, hope means the ability to reach out to the future and grab onto your dreams and bring it back to the present in spite of your past, in spite of your failures, in spite of your setbacks, in spite of your challenges, in spite of those hiccups. And so do you know what you want? And that's the biggest key, is, do I know what I want? And then if you don't, then let's figure that out. And then once you do know what you want, let's work on that desire. Let's work on that P-squared mindset. Let's work on that world record mindset that's going to get you those results that you desire.
Dude, heck yeah. Well, I love it. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. I appreciate it.
You betcha. Thank you so much.